So I guess, did you have an idea for your kids? Like, you thought, you're a lawyer, so did you ever think one of my kids is gonna be a lawyer? Not in without before you had kids. I'm saying, did you have this idea, right? Not like you observed your kids and you're like, this one's gonna be the lawyer, AJ probably, but was there an inkling beforehand, before you had kids, that, it'd be super cool if one of my kids was a lawyer? And maybe it didn't, maybe it didn't even manifest in that way. Maybe it manifested in, my kids are playing soccer instead of football.
No, I don't recall having that level of specificity in my hope and ambition for my kids.
Okay.
It's a great question, and I don't ever recall. I think we had this conversation before on this podcast where AJ was saying that, he was trying to figure out what to do in his career. Is he doing it? And very recently, talking the last 2 months, like if he's making the right choices and that kind of stuff, or what he does next. And he says, at the end of the day, he says, I know your wish for me is to be better off than you were, right? Because in his head, I think we talked about this.
Yep.
And in his head, every generation wants their generation, their kids, to do better than them, right?
Right.
And I fall back on that. It's like, I never expected that. No, I didn't want you guys to be better, or otherwise. I'm not saying that we're horribly, wealthy, and of course we're doing okay, but that wasn't the measure of anything. It had to do with, did you enjoy what you do, and are you thriving at it because you like it? That was really the threshold, I suppose. And when I had kids, I think overall I had more ambition about, I wish they would be, I had hoped that we'll supply with the best we can so they can get the education. They can go to the Ivy League. I think that would have been more like it, about the path and the tools that they would have so they could succeed at whatever they wanted to be. I don't recall that I wanted a kid to be a doctor or a priest or a lawyer or a pilot, or excel in sports as a living necessarily. I can't recall that I had that.
What about, I guess, do you have ever friends like that? I mean, because you hear all the time, like, once I'm done with this, I'm just going to go work at my dad's company, right? And I'm going to kind of move up that direction, right? Do you ever have any experience with friends having to work with their dad's law firm, or their dad's
Not that I recall.
You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And not that I recall. Not that I recall. I mean, you in your circle of friends, that, right? Yep. We got Willy Wonka in your sphere, or particularly AJ's sphere. And so he gets to work with his dad making chocolate. Okay, that doesn't suck.
That's true.
But that doesn't happen often. I guess what I'm getting at is, my experience, it doesn't happen often. As often as it should, in the movies, it sounds like they do, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's just a big plot point for.
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, I was forced to go into a law firm, but I wanted to be a musician, right? And that's it's a great storyline for a Hallmark movie. Oma would watch, right? So, but I don't recall that being the case. I don't recall anything in particular. I'll be honest with you. I think it was more about my kids having the things that they needed to succeed, and we would make that happen, and they would thrive at whatever it was going to be. And I didn't even have a plan to say, hey, we'll find out what that is. It was just a matter of taking care of our kids and providing them with the resources they needed, but not really kind of spoon-feeding it to, kind of steering it towards,
right.
I want them to be a doctor, or I want them to be a lawyer, or I want them to be a superstar of some sort.
And don't get me wrong, I didn't feel the pressure that I needed to do one thing or the other. God forbid if I was going to be a lawyer. I didn't want that. But do you ever think that, due to the proximity of you being a lawyer, that your kids, like by osmosis, would just have that? Did you ever see that ever being a case? And to kind of provide maybe a little bit more of a concrete example, right? My buddy Ryan Bone, he has 3 kids, and he's in the military. And it's not that he is going to drive his oldest son to also join the army, right? He's much more open than that. But I think it's also a very real possibility that his son has been around the army so much that it's just the next step. And maybe military is a little bit more niche in that sense. It happens more often. because they know the lifestyle already, that it might be an easy transition. But it happens all the time, I think, in the military, where it's like, oh, my dad was in the Navy, so I joined the Navy, right? That's what I know. Even though it wasn't actively pushed on by the parent, through proximity, the child kind of absorbed that mindset. Was that something you were worried about? Was that something you thought about?
No, I never thought much about my kids being an attorney until they showed aptitude towards it. Going to your point,
Until you thought, oh dear God, please don't be an attorney, Ryan.
No, I wouldn't steer you away from it. Actually, I take that back. I probably would have steered you away from it because I don't think I wouldn't have believed that's what you wanted. You may have been doing it for other reasons, right? At this point, I hear still people like, oh, my kid wants to be a lawyer. Can you talk to them? It's like, yeah, I'll talk them out of it. I mean, it's something that you want to. I want to talk to people as to, I want to talk to people who are going into law, for example, as to why are you doing it? Don't do it if you think it's the money or the glamour, because that ain't it, right? You got to do it because I like this part of it, and the discipline that it takes could be like any your discipline as well. But the discipline, the tough times and the dry times, it's boring. That's you got to be able to drive through that because the whole concept you appreciate. So, but I didn't really think any of them. I did see the aptitude, and I say aptitude meaning desire. There could be inkling of desires or ability with Danielle and AJ. And I would say that the likelihood there's those of all of them most likely to become a lawyer insofar as pursuing it would have been Danielle. Yeah. So I think she chose not to ultimately, and she made some good choices. I'm not worried about that. I don't mind that she's not a lawyer, but I think she actually more seriously considered than anybody. AJ has the aptitude because of the way he thinks. He'd probably be a hell of a criminal defense attorney, but getting there was the path that he didn't want to pursue. And he sees it more as a hobby than, it's like anything else. I think he sees arguing and moving things around and switching people's realities and opinions around more as a hobby and not as a career. So, I mean, using that example, lawyers do many different things, not just that, but that's generally what we think of lawyering. And that was AJ's strength is his ability to do that. So I never considered that. To me, it was all about what do you guys want to be so that you are happy with what you do. And that you have, you can sustain yourself and your family or whatever you want to do, and do it on your own so that you weren't dependent on a spouse to have to do it. I mean, if you want to, that's also okay. But really, it was a matter of, but you can do. I didn't care what it was. I really didn't, and still don't. I still don't care what it is. I think AJ, if he had, he told me the other day, he says, sometimes I think I just want to be a welder, and it's like, go. I then try it. I don't care. I mean, don't do it for me. And it was a fleeting thought for him. But the point is, I get that, and I don't have anything to say otherwise about that. I'm happy with you guys having a focus and pursuing it. Yes, that I do appreciate.
Right.
And whether that means I'm just gonna, I want to go to work in yoga pants and at the moment and run a Pilates studio, and paid for what she does, because paid pretty well, by the way. But it's a good choice on her part. She chose wisely, but she's doing that. Or I want to go to the Olympics and everything in between. It doesn't matter. It's just I'll feed it and pursue it the best I can for you guys. That's the role. That's my role. Did you ever feel like I was otherwise steering or projecting ambition?
No, I know. I never thought. I want to say no, but I felt, and this might be a uniquely me problem. When growing up, I think you and Mom were just like, you know what, Ryan's gonna do what Ryan does, and you didn't fight that. So in my aspect, I felt that you read my personality well, and I never felt pressure to do anything, except for the broad stroke, go to college, get an education type things. There were some things that I felt that maybe you or Mom wanted that I didn't, namely my Eagle Project. So I was in scouting for all of my life, right? The 10 to 17 year, or 10 from the years of 10 to 17. And
by the way, we still talk about that.
And this is something
we talked about that recently.
And this is something that I've dealt with personally overall, and I'm come to accept, and something that I believe now very true is the reason. So I liked scouting because of the things I got to do. I got to hike, I got to canoe, I got to shoot guns, There were a lot of opportunities that I was given due to scouting that I would not have probably had otherwise. Right, one of my best memories is backpacking around Catalina Island. It's one of my memory. Well, it's such a profound memory. I have it tattooed on my arm. Right. Yeah, okay. It's on the back of my arm. It's Catalina Island, and it's somewhere I want to take Ashley because I think it's such a beautiful and amazing experience. It's something I want to share in the future. What I did not like about scouting was the overarching pressure from what felt like the adults to essentially get your Eagle Scout. Once again, I reconciled this with this later in my life around 24, 25. I never wanted it myself. I realized that was never something that I wanted. That's something other people wanted for me, and then I may have internalized as my desire. But ultimately, we didn't succeed. I ran into some logistical problems, some administrative problems that I never pushed past because I never had the desire to push past them. Right? I didn't want the Eagle Scout enough that I decided to be like, oh, you know what? This logistical pickup is a nightmare, but I don't care. I'm going to push past this to get my Eagle Scout. It was, nope, this roadblock is just a bit about enough to stop me. So we're going to end it here. And it felt, between the years about 17 to 23, it felt very much like, oh, maybe I should have done it. Maybe I should have finished it. When in reality now, I don't regret not finishing ever. I have other things, I guess, to rest my laurels on now for sure.
Gee, like your advanced degree?
Like an advanced degree, right?
Yeah,
like,
whatever.
But in my early adult life, technically, right? It did feel like a measurement of lack thereof of success, right? Of something I failed at, and now that kind of sets the mood down. So it wasn't necessarily, and I don't know where you and Mom kind of entered in on that versus the general overarching atmosphere of scouting that maybe kind of pervaded it all. So that stuff I'm a little blurry on, but I'm confident with where I am now.
I think I feedback on that. So, because we actually talked about you not making Eagle recently. And there was someone else in the room, or somebody else, I can't remember who it was. So that wasn't like me and Mom just randomly talking about it. It had to do with, it was in a certain context. And the experience that Mom had in scouts and that kind of thing. And she had a very good experience. I'm so proud of her that she was a scout leader like she was for so many years, and what she accomplished, and how it, because she likes the outdoors. It was a way to her to do that. I'm not big on that. So for her, she got to do it with her boys, all of that. It's a good point. And again, in prior podcasts, we talked about creating options for our kids, even at their expense. Right. And it's very similar. And we spoke mostly in the context of academics. You need to get at least a B because you need to take the honors class next year so that you have the option to go to a UC school. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. Something like that, right? So cause and effect. And I submit that there's a tough age for parents and kids, and it's usually going to be between, 13 and 18, where we're trying to make those, foster those decisions even against your will, because we do believe it creates options that you otherwise don't have, or that you otherwise will have regrets later not having done. And I think it's a good question. Eagle Scout, we did nudge AJ towards it, but there was a reason for AJ. I think it was, AJ was different. It was just the administrative. He's otherwise capable of doing it, and it was a moniker. For some reason, we thought that would be good for him, and he just didn't want to do it because he didn't want to do it. Yours is more philosophical, I think. His was more to piss us off, right? Not to do it, something like that. And that's the bad fight to pick with us. When you're just trying to piss us off, we will win. But I think philosophically, we knew maybe that's not where you were headed. You were a different person. Again, we read our kids and we kind of foster things. But it's interesting because I said somebody else was in the room. I can't remember what the context was, but about how you were the quintessential, the reason why it was discussed for you and amongst the adults in the troop, not just Mom, was because you were the quintessential scout. You were the quintessential Eagle Scout in every sense of the word, right? Physically, intelligently, and probably most importantly, leadership and the quality of leadership, meaning you cared for other people and took care of other people. And so you were the quintessential Eagle Scout. You didn't do it because you did it for merit, like some kids do. Some troops, as you know, other troops are really
Yeah.
run by the dads and they do it for merit purposes. You didn't, it was, if you did it, you would have done it because you felt it was a fair duty to do and a good accomplishment. Because you were the quintessential scout. When you didn't choose to do it, I think that's why they backed off. They were really doing it because, you're Captain America, when it comes to that, insofar as your abilities and the things that you do physically and everything else. So you would have been a good balance of a great Eagle Scout. You would have been a phenomenal Eagle Scout. And to the point that with your son, if and when he does scouts, or if he does scouts, you would have been able to carry that moniker that I'm an Eagle Scout. And you do get deference, as I
Yeah.
see in some cases,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And so you will again notice it that you did not make Eagle Scout.
Sure.
You won't regret it. You
Right,
won't
right,
regret
right,
it.
right, right.
Let me be clear. Life Scout, with as much of honors that you've had and the experiences you've had, and more importantly, the good experiences you had that you retained and created who you are, good part of who you are, just as you mentioned, that alone is a win. We'll take that, right? That's okay. It's a tremendous accomplishment. But to be clear, that's something that when your son's, it's going to be that a-hole dad that's there. That
Yeah, right.
of course, he's like, and he's chopping wood, he's starting fire from this and that kind of thing. And this is what I'm an Eagle Scout. He's the Type A kind of guy. And of course, your son looks at you and says, "Dad, were you an Eagle Scout?" It's like, "Dad, that was for nerds." Whatever your response is going to be, right? Your response is going to be.
Yeah.
And even then, you're going to say, "Who cares?" and doesn't matter, and you're not going to feel, any less of it. But it is something that, to be honest with you, that father, my guess, and there's many fathers who are great Eagle Scouts and good fathers and good leaders, but the one I'm making the caricature, if you will, of this some a-hole father out there who's trying to show off and how great he is in the outdoors,
Right.
has been an Eagle Scout,
right.
is what you're going to have to deal with now.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
right.
And that's where you take him down a notch. It's like, oh no, Eagle Scouts are for nerds like my brother, so but anyway, I think that's an interesting observation, because it was very recently discussed on more than one occasion about how you didn't make Eagle, and not in the sense of we were disappointed. It's like, oh, that would have been nice, but it's okay that you didn't. It was not disappointing.
Yeah, it was for a long time, I guess. It did bug me. I was like, oh, I could have done it. But yeah, I came to terms with it. I was like, you know what? That was not the reason I was in Scouts. That was not the thing. When I think of the time I enjoyed in scouting, never do I think of the merit badges that I had to earn.
Or
the check boxes that I had to check off, right? Like that was never, and I think you're right, it's a philosophical issue where like, I don't think scouting should be about knocking out the next check box, right? And I think I realized that at a young age and it just couldn't figure it out. I just wanted to know how to tie the knots. I wanted to build the things. I wanted to make the fires, right? I wanted to hike. I wanted to backpack. I wanted to do the canoeing. But if I have to go through some sort of administrative stuff to prove that I can do the canoeing, right? I was like, no, it's dumb.
I guess I think the way it's perceived, I didn't say it works. I could maybe a little archaic in its methodology. I don't know. But I submit that the Boy Scout the Cub Scout and then the Weeblo and then Boy Scout handbook is a curriculum.
Right.
You're capable of doing those. The things that you do, that you can hike and canoe and shoot and everything else, is a result of there was a curriculum that taught you that, and all they wanted to do was test you onto, did you achieve that? And again, so administratively, you could have just checked the box. So the checking in the box is really the result of the experience, not the other way around. It's not an experience of checking boxes. It's an experience of doing things like shooting and that kind of thing,
Sure.
and having achieved those different things and expose yourself like a curriculum. You've tried different things and you've achieved certain goals. Then you can check the box. And by the way, you expose yourself to enough of these, you get to be Eagle. I think that's really maybe how it would be perceived. I don't know.
I think maybe that was the intention, right? How it's set up,
Correct.
but I don't think it gets executed. At least.
Well, I think we have we have freedom of choice now. There's a lot of things different than in the early, into the 20s, 30s, into the 50s, when scouting was more of a curriculum and structure. Then there was no social media, there was no talking back to parents. You just did what you did. So now you have freedom of choice and freedom to say, I'm not going to do this, freedom to say, I'm going to go to the football game instead of do this, event for scouts, and say competing choices, and maybe just interferes with that. which makes being able even more significant in some ways. But again, I'm not knocking it. I'm with you on that. I'm not at all disappointed
Right.
that you're in your Life Scout, and your brother quit. Your younger brother had to quit earlier because of his training, but
Yeah.
and they try to work around him on that. He just chose not to do it at all. They said, "Well, work with him because he's got," and I know he's just not going to do it. So that's interesting, though. Achievements, ambition, things we see for our kids. I can't recall. I think anything you did, we wanted the best thing for you.
Yeah, and I felt that, and I don't think that's. I don't know exactly, and I think this is the issue. Is I don't know how privileged I am to have that, right? Whereas you see other people who their parents couldn't care, right? So they have nothing driving them. Or on the flip end, it's super laser tight focused, helicopter mom. We're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do this, and now 40 years later, they're in a career that they hate.
Yep. We try. We don't know if we got it right yet, but that's what we try. We try to balance it. But I will tell you, we continue to fight for everything that we want for you guys, and we don't know what that is, but we think excelling at everything you do is what you want, right? Maybe have a good time with it, but that's important too. But excelling, and I will tell you, there's nothing better in bonding between your spouse, bonding with your spouse, than potentially almost getting blackcarded by a referee on a soccer field because you're yelling at him too much about how he's making lousy calls while you're playing a soccer game, right? Yeah. Even the coach are like, chill out. Parents are like, yeah, but it's just, you get so into it. You want so much for your child to have a fair shot, and when it's not there, you defend them and get involved, and you don't do that very often. Right. But it comes, and most parents will have that given the opportunity. They're going to sit there and yell at the ref. But I was telling you, like, boy, that was a great. We've never bonded better than your mother and I, than almost being blackcarded off the field. So, but it all goes back to, we want what you want, and we think we know what that is. In Evan's case, he's very good now about his tournaments, and he tells me his results and why he's happy with them without me saying, hey, you didn't hit the number you wanted, or you didn't take gold, whatever it is. It's a matter of, this is why I think I achieved my goals, Dad. And he tells me, like, good, as long as you're happy with that. I've learned how to manage that expectation too. So I get it. But so ambitions, I think my ambitions for my kids, I wish they would have been successful in any sense of the word that they can in the long run, by being happy in their jobs and being good people as a result, because they're not stressed out about it and they've made choices that they own. I think we've done that. I think I'm very lucky that I've achieved that, but that was if I have to define it, that's what it was. It wasn't titles and it wasn't money. It was success in your line of field, your whatever it is, your field, it's important to me. So we've done that. Ambition for myself. I knew I wanted to achieve certain goals. I think I achieved most, not all, but I've achieved a lot of them. And a lot of them have to do with relevance. I wanted to be known as the guy, right? You want to be the person. That's just this. People want to be relevant in the professional environment. And I think I've achieved points of relevance, including the titles and stuff that go with it. So I've checked all my boxes. I got my Eagle Scout.
Yeah.
I literally got my Eagle Scout. So I'm kind of now like, now what do I do? So I run my own business instead, and my own firm and that kind of thing. And that's interesting, but I no longer have to pursue checking the boxes because I've already achieved that. I think you kind of helped me articulate where I am in my career by basing using the Eagle Scout thing. I don't need to check the boxes anymore. So so those are the kind of things that I'm happy with my ambitions for myself. My ambitions that I had for my kids. I hope I didn't beat them up or skew them, or they respect the distance we gave them, but gave them enough support. It was a good balance. I hope that's the case. And my kids who had ambition to be whatever they wanted to be and how they wanted to do it, and using Evan as an example, I think I'm a good support in there as well. We think we did that one correctly. Right. Again, maybe I'm the wrong person to ask, right? It should be ask Evan, but in that case. But when we talk about extraordinary ambitions and unique, laser-focused niche, that's the one in the family we can talk about. All of my kids are very proud of, but I'm saying that's what we're talking about. But I think we handled that one correctly. The one thing I remember, I'll say that we can close with this. The one last thing I recall with Evan when he decided to do fencing, which is a family sport for those who know on podcasts, like something I did before, and all you boys did, and particularly AJ and Evan, took to it in different ways. And but we had to make a decision at one point about, I think Evan was 10, whether
Yep.
he was going to fence or he wanted to do go-karts, race cars, right? And I had looked at the race cars. I saw little go-karts you had to buy. He's like, oh, those are expensive. I'm not going to do that. Seems like an expensive sport. We'll do fencing. That's cheaper.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it is, but not by much.
Yeah. Right. Relatively speaking.
Relatively speaking. But he could have done that too. That's another thing we could have done for him and with him. So,
Yep.
It's a choice that he wanted to make. But anyway, I think that answers it. I hope so.
I think so.
I think we're good and balanced. So I think we covered that.